Hi there, welcome to today's painting tutorial. Today we are going to paint a dragon eye with acrylic paints. So let's get started and grab the sketch in the description below so you can paint along with me. I'm going to start with a size 0 round brush and dip into this black paint. And then let's put in the black of the pupil. So I'm putting this in carefully. Try to get a crisp edge if you can. Get a nice point at the bottom and at the top. Okay, and then I'm going to put this brush to the side and switch to another 0 round brush. And I'm going to take some of this dark brown, the burnt umber, and then take this one and go around the outside edge of the eye. This is the iris area. Take that and go all the way around. Again, try to get crisp edges. And then after we have this layer of burnt umber, let's go to a burnt sienna. And then put the burnt sienna in there. And I'm allowing it to mix a little bit with that darker brown to create a little bit of a transition. And this has a nice orangey glowing effect to it. Okay, so now we want to do the upper part of the eye. I'm going to take some of this dark brown and do a few lines up here. Just a few lines along the top. And then I'm going to dip into that burnt sienna and start putting that in as well. And it's okay if that paint mixes together. Okay, I might want to go back into the dark brown and bring some of those streaks of dark brown back in. Trying to cover up all the whites of the paper. This dark brown is going to give us some nice contrast. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to some yellow. Let's take this bright yellow. This is a medium yellow or a yellow medium hue. And let's start putting that in. Using the same technique, trying to use the point of the brush. And you could also put a little bit around those other edges along the outside. Okay, but I'm going to keep bringing that bright, intense yellow out. And then I want to switch to a lighter yellow. So I have this light yellow here, and I'm going to start putting some of that in there. And then we could also add some white. Take a little bit of white paint. And again, you're trying to make these little lines, little bursts, almost like a flower. Okay, and then I'm going to take the burnt sienna and let's start putting that in around this outside edge. Just little strokes here. Okay, just put these little lines and then try to cover up the whites of the paper. Could bring some that go a little bit closer into the center. This is something you can play with and take your time with to get the effect that you'd like. And take some of this darker brown, and that gives it a nice contrast. Just trying to cover up all that white of the paper. Okay, and you could go back with some of this dark brown and maybe bring some of it out a little bit with this darker color. Just give it a little bit more interest and make it look more natural. Okay, so now let's move to the outside of the eye. And for that, I'm going to switch to, let's try a 1 dome brush. And I'm going to use, let's take some of this burnt umber here, maybe mix it with some dark gray. And then I'm going to go around the outside of the eyelid. So I'm using the dark gray. And let's put, I'm going to take this burnt umber, put a little bit over here for that section of the eye. Then around this section. And in here, we actually want it to be red. So I'm going to pick up that 0 round brush. Let's take the burnt sienna. Go around the outside edge with the burnt sienna. And then take some of this vermilion red and put that red in the center here. And I might even bring some of this red up into the eye as well, just so we have a little more cohesion. Okay, so let's keep working on the eyelid. I'm going to go around this area here. And I can add a little bit of black in here as well, just to up the contrast. But I don't want it completely black because I want to put some eyelashes in there, so I don't want it completely black. Okay, so we have that darker shade. And then we have that dark around the eye, around the top of the eye. And then let's pick up a little bit of white and some of this bluish gray. And I'm going to start putting in that lighter value of the top of the eyelid. Okay, that light blue is going to come forward in space and make the eyelid look three-dimensional. And then let's do the bottom area. So we have the darker color around the edges. And then we want that lighter color, so I'll take some of the light blue and bring that into the center. That's going to make it come forward a little bit. Let's bring it down this way as well. So we'll take some of the dark gray And then I'll take that light blue and bring it down here. I'm trying to save the highlights for later. And then we can take the dark color, go around the fold in the lower lid. And then we can take some of the light blue and then go underneath. I'm going to take some dark color, bring it along this back. Okay, so now we want to work on all these little scales. So to do that, let's mix up a dark gray color. And you can just go around the scales or create a shape, a scale shape. And then while it's still a little bit wet, we want to add a lighter color. So I'm going to take some of this red and it's mixing with the dark value. I'm going to bring some red in there. And then we can bring a light color. So I could use this grayish blue, and then put that in the center of the scale. And then we can continue in that pattern. The darker colors, and then the lighter colors in the center. And if you need a lighter value, you can just add a little bit of white in there, and that'll lighten your values as well. Okay, so we'll do that same pattern. Taking the dark color, going around these scales, and then I'll add some red. And then I'll add the light blue in the center. And that makes a nice highlight. Okay, you don't have to detail all of these. And if you want, you can just pause the video, take your time, use that method, and go along all of the scales. So let's work on the ones up here. I'm using that tip of the brush, going around the edge, and then dipping into that darker red color. Adding that in the center, and then taking some light blue and popping that in as the highlight. Okay, and we'll do some more up here. We have the dark color and then the red. And then we'll take that light blue and pop that in the center. Okay, so I'm going to continue over here. Going along all these little sketch marks here. And then we'll do the red color. And then I'm going to pick up the light blue and put some highlights in there. Okay, so let's do this section over here. So I'm just doing smaller sections so that the acrylic paint doesn't dry on me. And then we'll do the red. And then that light blue. Okay, we're working wet on wet. Okay, so I might come down here and add a few more scales up at this top here. I'm going to do these with the dark gray. And when they're closer to the eye here, you can make them a little bit smaller. And then when you get further out, you can make them bigger. Okay, we'll take some of that red paint. Our nice dark red. This brush has a rounded tip, so it's a little bit easier to get these circles in here instead of using a pointed round brush. Okay, and then we'll take the light blue. We can highlight this. Okay, so now you can step back and look at your work. I'm going to go back and clean up some of these areas so that all the whites of the paper is covered up. I'm going to go back and add some darker red over here. It's a little bit too light. So we don't really want to highlight there. You can always go back and darken things. Add that blue. Okay, so now would be a good time to go back and add some details. Let's take the 0 round brush, the one with the point. Let's actually take a 0 liner brush. And I'm going to roll that in some black paint. And I have a little bit more water on there so that we can get some smooth lines. And then let's add in some eyelashes. So I'm going to come down, and then we want some smaller ones around this part of the eye. Just make some small little lashes. It's better to go from the center and then out. It'll get a little bit more of a natural shape. Okay, so some nice thick lashes. You can come back with this black and make a line down here. Darken some of, you could actually bring some down here. Darken this lid at the bottom. And then you can bring some lashes along the bottom as well. Okay, so now I want to do some highlighting with this brush. So I'm going to mix some white paint. And let's start with the white first. And I want to put some around the eye. Let's go around the outside edge of the eye. And then along this area here. I'm going to mix a little bit of blue with it. And then bring some along this top edge. And then along this bottom lid. All the way down this way. Okay, reinstate that if you need to make a thicker line. And with the 0 round brush, let's put in the highlight of the eye. And we can put that right here. I'm going to go back with this dome brush and some dark gray and black. And then put a little bit of a shadow around the eye here. I just want to have a little more definition. And a bit of a shadow down this way. Just emphasize some of these shadows. Bring out a little bit more contrast. And maybe bring some around this eye, the corner of the eye. Just clean it up a little bit. Okay, and then I can go back and maybe highlight around the bottom of the eye. So we'll use some of that light blue. And let's see if we could dry brush on some highlights at this point. And this dome brush is good for that because it's pretty soft. So you could just go along some of these scales and just bring them out a little bit by adding just a few highlights. And then along the top, you could do, let's try some white with some of this darker red. See if we could make a highlight for up here. And again, I'm sort of dry brushing, just putting these small little highlights and smaller when we get closer to the eye, and then larger when we're up along the outer edges. Okay, and you don't have to do all of the scales. And when you think about where you want your brightest highlights to be, where is that reflection? So it's going to kind of image this one or mirror this one here. So it could be along the bottom of the eyelid. Okay, and I think we will call this demonstration complete. So that is how you can paint a dragon eye with acrylic paint. I hope you give this a try. Like and subscribe for more painting tutorials, and grab my free guide if you want to go deeper into acrylic painting, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.